In this video for Computer Science 9618, we're going to take a look at another full paper for walkthrough. This is variant 2, coming from the testing session of October and November of 2022. So let's go ahead, let's take a look at the very first question. A computer program is needed to store jobs in order of priority. Each job has a job number, for example 1, 2, 3, and a priority from 1 to 10, with 1 being the highest priority, 10 being the lowest. The program stores the jobs in a global 2D array. The pseudocode declaration for the array is, we're going to declaring jobs. It's going to be an array with a lower bound of 0 for the rows, an upper bound of 99, and we're going to have 2 columns, a lower bound of 0 with an upper bound of 1. Each of these locations are going to store an integer. And then they give us an example. Job 00 stores the job number of the first job. Job 01 stores a priority. These are not values. These are locations of where the values can be found. This 0, 0, that means in row 0, column 0, the first row and the first column, we're going to find an integer there, and that is going to be the job number of the first job. In row 0, column 1, we're going to find another integer that's showing the priority of the first job. The global variable number of jobs stores the number of jobs currently in the array. So we have the array and we have a variable number of jobs. Now, there's going to be 100 jobs. We have to pay attention to the lower bound here for the job number. It's 0 all the way up to 99. And when you count from 0 to 99, that's 100 jobs. Because they have given us this lower bound of 0, we have to use that when we code it out. So it says write program code to declare the global 2D array jobs and the global variable number of jobs. Then right after that, we're going to write the procedure initialize, which stores -1 in each of the array elements and assigns 0 to number of jobs. Write program code for the procedure initialize. So we have the word procedure. We know it's going to be a sub. It's not returning anything. It's just executing that code. So let's swing over to vb.net. Let's declare those global variables and write the procedure initialize. We know our global variables go outside submain. So I'm going to dim jobs. Now it is a 2D array. So we're essentially creating a table. The first thing we need to do is put the upper bound of the rows. Well, there's 100 jobs it can store. When we look at the pseudocode they gave us, it says it had an upper bound of 99. If I count from 0 to 99, that will give me 100 rows. If I count from 0 to 1, this will give me 2 columns. And what does each table or cell in the table hold? It's going to hold an integer. The first column being the job number, the second column being the priority for that job. On row 0, which is the first row, we're going to find the job number and the job priority. Those are stored in separate columns. So you're essentially creating a table. The next thing we need is number of jobs. That's going to be an integer as well. What we can do now is we can go ahead and write the procedure initialize. So if you've been following my videos in the past, you've seen that anytime we have procedure, we're writing a sub. And we give the name initialize. Cambridge gave us that name. No parameters. Nothing goes on the outside because it's not a function. It's not returning anything. It just needs to execute this code. Number of jobs is equal to 0. Now what I need to do now is traverse the table of jobs. I need to traverse every row and every column and fill it with the value of -1. So I do for I equals 0 to 99. When you're looking at the value of I, this is representing each row. I'm going to start on row 0. I need to populate on row 0, column 0, and column 1 with the value of -1. How do I represent my columns? That is with the value of j. For j equals 0 to 1. The very first time this runs, it's going to populate row 0, column 0 with -1. This inner loop is going to swing back around J becomes 1, and it's going to populate row 0, column 1 with the value of -1. Then it's going to loop around. I increments to 1. It's going to do row 1, column 0, put -1 in there. Inner loop loops back around. J now becomes 1. Row 1, column 1 becomes -1. The inner loop is done. The outer loop loops back around. I is now 2, and it goes on and on. So we're going to do jobs, row I, column J equals -1. Just like that, we have finished part B of the first part of the question. Let's take a look at the next part of the question. And for part C, we see the procedure add job. Takes a job number and priority as parameters. So we have 2 parameters here. Stores the job in the next free array element. Outputs added if the job was successfully stored in the array. Outputs not added if the job was not successfully stored in the array. Write program code for the procedure add job. Let's swing over to VB. Let's code this procedure out. All right, we're going to write the procedure add jobs. Takes 2 parameters. The first one is the job number. So we're going to do that as an integer. The second one is the priority. I spelled it wrong. I guess it doesn't really matter. But I might as well spell it correctly while we're here. Okay, now if my number of jobs is equal to 100, then job wasn't added. There's no more jobs left to add. So I'm going to do what Cambridge asked us to do and write not added. Now, if we are not at the 100th job, or we don't have 100 jobs, then we got room. So jobs. Now I'm going to get this number of jobs to do most of the work for us. Number of jobs. What is number of jobs right now? It is 0. So what am I putting in row 0, column 0? I'm putting in the job number. Well, I'm going to do jobs again because I got to fill in the second column. So I'm going to use number of jobs again. This time column 1, which is actually the second column, and I'm putting in there priority. Now, I need to make sure I increment this number of jobs by 1. Otherwise, it's going to take all 100 jobs and keep overriding the same position. So I'm going to do number of jobs plus equals 1. Then I'm going to output the message that Cambridge asked us to output, which is job added. So just like that, we have our procedure, add jobs. We got our 2 parameters. We check to see, make sure there's room. If number of jobs equals 100, we're not going to add it. If it's not 100, we're going to use number of jobs to access the current row that we're on, or the next available one. We fill in both columns, the first column with job number, the second one with priority, and this is very important. We have to increment number of jobs since we're using that to access the rows. But we're ready to move on to the next part of the question. The main program, which is sub main, should call the procedure initialize, the one we just wrote, and then use the add job procedure to store the following jobs in the order given. Write program code for the main program, or sub main, and perform the task described. Let's swing over, let's call initialize, and then add job using the data they have given us here. Using the main program, sub main, we call initialize. So I'm going to call that. That will set everything up that we wrote earlier. Then what we need to do is we need to add those jobs using the data they gave us. So the first job number is 12, it has a priority of 10. The next job number that we have that they gave us is 526. That has a priority of 9. We're going to add jobs again. The third piece of data was 33 with a priority of 8. The next one they gave us was a job with a job number 12 with a priority of 9. Not very important jobs, I guess. And then, add jobs again, 78. This has a priority of 1. That one's extremely important. So just like that, we have finished that part of the question. Let's take a look at the next part. When a new job has been added, the array is sorted into ascending numerical order of priority using an insertion sort. So we want to stop here. We want to make some quick notes. We know it needs to be in ascending order, but we have two columns or two numbers to deal with, the job number and the job priority. So this is an ascending numerical order of priority. The next thing is, what type of sort are we using? We're using an insertion sort. Now, they could easily, just as easy, ask you to do it using a bubble sort. So you want to be familiar with both an insertion sort and a bubble sort. Write program code for the procedure insertion sort to sort the data into ascending numerical order of priority. Let's swing over and let's code that out. Before we write the insertion sort, I thought it was weird that it was add jobs, plural. I thought that was weird because we're adding one job at a time. I went back and reviewed the question. It isn't called add jobs, it's called add job. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and fix this. Just take out all these extra plurals that we have here and make it add job. All right. Perfect. There we go. So now we're ready to write the insertion sort. So we just do sub insertion sort. No parameters here, no return data type. And then we need a couple things. Anytime you're switching things around and you're sorting the data, you need to store all the data temporarily. Because we have a 2D array, not only do I need to temporarily store the job priority, I also need to do the job number. So I'm going to do job number as integer. Job P for job priority is an integer in case I need to switch something around. If I just overwrite the existing data and I don't back it up in a temporary variable, I've overwritten it. Now I can't get back to it. But if I store it temporarily in some variables, I'll be able to actually make the switch. I also need to know what row I'm on, and I need to know if it's been put in place. If it's been put in the right place, I can move to the next row. Remember, this sort is all about the job priority. When you're using an insertion sort, you're going to take the current row that we're on, we're going to look at the job priority, and we're going to see if it's less than the previous row job priority. If it is, we need to switch it. Once we have it put in place, we're going to move to the next row, and we're going to keep comparing it all the way, taking the current row we're on, comparing it to everything that has been sorted already. We start with a for loop for I equals 1 to number of jobs minus 1. Remember, when you're doing an insertion sort, we don't start at index 0. There's nothing to the left of index 0 that we need to compare the job priority to. There's no index -1. Number of jobs minus 1. Remember, we started at index 0, so we have to count for that. If we do to number of jobs without this -1, it's going to give us an index out of bounds exception error, and our program is going to crash. The first thing we need to do is temporarily store that job number. Where's that located? Well, I'm going to check I, and then column 0, job priority. That's going to move to the, I is going to go through each row, and I know the priority is in 1. Now we also need to do our row equals I, because we need to check the previous row. I can't do I minus 1 all the time because I'm going to need to decrement the row every time it goes through. And if I decrement I every time, the for loop is never going to end. It's just going to repeatedly compare the same items. Put in place equals false because before I enter my while loop, it hasn't been put in place. Now we want to make sure row is greater than 0. If it's not greater than 0, then we compared it all the way to the left. There is no -1. And if we haven't put it in place yet, so if put in place equals false, then we know there's some things that need to happen. Now, how do we know a switch happens? Well, what we have to do is we got to take jobs row minus 1, comma 1. What in the world is that? Well, remember, we have a 2D array. I'm checking the previous row, and I'm checking the job priority. I need to see if that's greater than the job priority I temporarily stored. If it is, then I need to do a switch. So here's how I do that. I'm going to do jobs, row 0. What am I putting into row 0? Well, I'm putting in the jobs, row -1, 0. This will do the switch for the job number. Now I need to do the same thing, except for this time what I need to do is the job priority. So that goes in column 1. What am I putting there? That's going to be jobs, row -1, the previous row, and then 1. The switch for the job priority. Now, it hasn't actually switched yet. What we did was we took what was in the previous row and we just overwrote it into the row that we're currently on. Now, this is why it's so important that we back this up, because once I run these 2 lines of code, this data right here, the jobs I, 0, I, 1, whatever is there, it's gone. But I temporarily saved it in the job in and job P. So now I'll be able to do the switch in a minute. We need to decrement the row. We need to move to the next previous row. I can't do I minus equals 1 because then I'll never get out of the for loop. Now, if that is one case, the other case is it's not, and if it's not being switched, then put in place equals true. It's been put in the correct place. And then all I need to do now is right here before the next iteration of my I loop to go to the next row, all I need to do is in jobs, row 0, I'm going to make that equal to job in for my job number. Then I'm going to do jobs row 1, job priority. Now it's actually, I'm able to put it back in there because remember, we took the previous row and we put it here. We decremented the row by 1 and now we have row 0, row 1. We're putting that data back in there, and that is how the insertion sort works for this question. So again, you want to create this temporary data so it's not overwritten. We have our rows so we can traverse through each row, put in place so we know when to exit this loop here. Because once put in place is true, then we know we can exit that. Or if we get back to the very first index, which is row 0, that is the very first index of the 2D array. So let's take a look at the next part of the question. The procedure print array outputs each job number and priority on a line. For example, 123 priority 1, 39 priority 3, 120 priority 7. So it's the job number followed by the word priority followed by the job priority variable. Notice they have it all in one line. That means when we write our print array procedure, we also need to make sure it outputs on one line. So let's swing over to VB. Let's code that out. Subprint array. There we go. And all we need to do here is we need to use a for loop. For I equals, now we're going to start at index 0 because we're not doing the insertion sort. And we're going to number of jobs minus 1. We need to output everything. Now we are putting everything in one row. So because we're doing it in one row, we don't need to use a nested for loop because we're going to output everything on one line. So all we're going to do is we're going to output the jobs, and then that is going to be I, 0, and we're going to output the word priority, but we're going to put a space, and then we need to output the jobs priority number, and that is in column 1. And just like that, that will be enough. That will traverse through the whole thing and print the array on one line. Let's take a look at the next part of the question. The main program needs to sort the array and then output the contents of the array. In the main program, submain, by writing program code to call the procedures insertion, sort, and print array. Test your program, take a screenshot of the output. So let's swing over and let's make all this code work together so we can see it actually be sorted and then print it out in order according to job priority. All right, 2 lines of code. The first thing we need to do is sort the data That, of course, is after we added all those jobs. And then once we sort it, all we need to do is print the array. Now, it's time to run our code. Should be in order of job priority. We see 5 jobs were added. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 jobs. Started at index 0, went to number of jobs minus 1, which is index 4. Index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Everything is there, and it is in ascending order according to the job priority. So 78 has a priority of 1, 33 a priority of 8, 526 a priority of 9, 12 a priority of 9, and another 12 with the priority of 10. So that wraps up question 1, getting all those points. So let's go ahead and take a look at question number 2. For question 2, a computer game is being developed. The game has 10 different characters that are all active in the game. Part of the game is being written using object-oriented programming. The class character stores data about the characters. Each character has a name and the x-coordinate and y-coordinate of their current position. So we have 3 attributes here for each object. We have name as string, the x and y coordinate storing where they are on the map. We have the constructor, which initializes name, the x and y coordinates from the values passed as parameters. So we're not going to need set methods here. These set methods, instead of using those, all the values are being done by the constructor. Now we do have 3 get methods here, getting the name, the x and the y coordinate. We got to get those attributes. We'll need an object for that, of course. That's the whole point of object-oriented programming. And then changing position takes x change as an integer parameter, adds it to the x coordinate, y change adds it to the y coordinate. Now this one does include the txt file that will be included with your exam. You should be receiving 2 things. You should be receiving a txt file and your evidence document. How do you know when to use the txt file? Well, they're going to tell you in the test when to use it. They'll also remind you, because there will be a question in the test somewhere where it talks about accessing that txt file. Let's take a look at the first part of this question now that we have the base information. So the first part of the question, write program code to declare the class character and its constructor. Do not write program code for the other methods, meaning don't write those get methods. Don't write that change position method. Then write program code for the 3 get methods. So we're going to write the base class with the constructor, those attributes. Then right after that, we're going to go ahead and write those 3 get methods. All right, the first thing we need to do is create that class, public class character. Then we're going to do name as string, doing exactly what they told us to use. So y coordinate as integer. Then we have the y coordinates as integer. So those are the attributes. Now what we need to do is write the constructor. It's always going to be public sub new. It does take 3 parameters. It takes these three attributes that we created right here. So I'm going to do by val in as string, that's for the name. By val x as integer, that's for the x coordinate. By val y as integer, that's for the y coordinate. All I need to do is assign those parameter values to those attributes. So x coordinate is going to be equal to x. My y coordinate is going to be equal to y. And just like that, we've done the first part of the question. Now it's time to write those get methods. Our get methods are always going to be functions. So we're going to do public function get. What are we getting? We're getting the name, and that's also what Cambridge called it, so that's what we're going to use. And the name is returning a string. All you do for your get methods is return the attribute that you're getting. That's it. No more, no less. Let's go ahead and do the get x. Now, the x attribute is an integer, so that's why we return the data type as an integer. I return the x coordinate. Then we're going to do the same thing for the y coordinates. So I'm going to do public function get y as integer, and we're returning the y coordinate. And just like that, we are done with our get methods. Let's take a look at the next part of the question. Write program code for the method change position. Now remember, at the very beginning, they gave us a description, looked like this. Change position takes the x change as an integer parameter and adds it to the x coordinate, takes y change as an integer parameter, adds it to the y coordinate. So we have to use those parameter names. So make sure you're on the lookout for that. But let's swing over to VB. Let's add these parameters and let's write this change position method. So we write this method, public sub change position, and it accepts two parameters. So we're going to do by val x change as integer, by val again y change as integer, and all we need to do is change the x coordinate. So we're going to do x coordinates, and we're going to do plus equals the x change, and then the y coordinate is going to be plus equals the y change, and that will update both the x and the y change. Let's take a look at the next part of the question. The main program has a 1D array of characters. Each character is stored as an object of type character, so we get to create an array of objects here. The game has a maximum of 10 characters. The character names, x coordinates and y coordinates, are stored in the file characters.txt in the following order. Name followed by the x and y coordinate. It's all on separate lines, so we don't need to be using the split method here. We're just going to do 3 read lines to get those. For example, the first character in the file is named Amal with the x coordinate 0 and the y coordinate 2. I'm in the main program, submain, by writing program code to declare the array, read in all 10 characters from characters.txt, store each character as an object in the array. So let's swing over to submain and let's talk about how to create an array of objects. All right, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create some variables, name, x, and y. The reason I'm creating these is I know these names are, the name, the x, and the y are stored in the file. I need to be able to temporarily store them because when I create a new character object, I need to pass those values to the constructor. Now, we need to create an array of characters. So I do characters. I'm going to use index 0, and we just do it as character. Now, without the brackets. There we go, as character. If you try to do it as a new character, it's going to give you a red line. That is because the constructor cannot create 9 objects all at one time, but it can do it one at a time inside of a loop. So let's go ahead and get started. Anytime you're trying to open a file, you want to put it in a try-catch statement. So right here, I'm going to go ahead and handle the X as exception, and I'm going to say file not found. Now, give myself some room to work with. The first thing I want to do is I want to create a file reader. I'm not importing the system.io like I usually do, trying to show you something a little bit different. So I'm going to do file handle as new system.io.stream reader. And then what is the name of the file they gave me? That is characters. And yes, you have to put the .txt. And yes, it needs to be in quotes. Now, we're going to do until we reach the end of that file. So we do file handle .end of stream. I know name is on the first line. So I'm going to do name equals file handle .read line. Not a big deal. X equals file handle .read line because that's on the second line. And I'm going to do one more. Same thing. File handle .read line. So that will load in the name, the X, and the Y. Oh, we're also going to need a variable. Now that I'm thinking about it, we're going to need index as an integer because I got to keep track of all that, where we are in the array. I'm going to set, not integer, but index equal to 0. There we go. Because I need a value to hold this index number. Now, because I'm starting and including index 0, I set my index equal to 0. If you want to omit index 0 and you want to do 10, then you're going to start your index at 1. But this is where I'm going to create my new character. So I do characters index equals a new character. And what I need to do is I need to pass those values. I'm passing, this is where Control Z comes in handy. I'm passing name, X, and Y, and that will create the new character. Index plus equals 1. That's going to keep going until we loop all the way through to the end of the stream. Then what I need to do file handle dot close. And just like that, we are done. I've created 10 characters, including index 0, and I count 0 to 9. That is 10 characters. And make sure you close the file. Don't forget to do that. And again, anytime you're using file handling, you want to use a try-catch statement. Let's move on to the next part of the question. The main program, that submain, needs to read in a character's name from the user, search for the character in the array, and store the index of its position. It repeats until the user enters a name that exists in the array. Amend the main program, submain, by writing program code to perform this task. Now, because the user is entering a name here, we need to account for uppercase, all lowercase, all uppercase, the uppercase of the first letter. Well, rather than doing all of those, we're going to take the user input, we're going to convert everything to lowercase, we're going to take our object, we're going to convert its name to lowercase, we're going to compare those values to see if they match. It's a lot easier to do that than trying to code for every single possibility. So let's swing over to vb.net and do that right now. I'm going to start by creating some variables. I'm going to need the index position. I need to know where they're located, because once we find it, we have to record the index of where they are located. I'm also going to do search name as string. That's so the user can enter the name they are searching for, and then success as a Boolean variable, because they have to keep entering the name until we find that character. So I'm going to set success equal to false, and then I'm going to start building my loop. So I'm going to do loop until success equals true. Now, when I ask the user for the name, I need to do that inside the loop. Console.writeLine, what name are you searching for? And then we're going to do that. Search name equals console.readLine. All right, now, once we get the name, what we need to do is we need to iterate through each index of the array to see if it matches. But what the user types in may not match the same format as the character name. So we need to convert everything to lowercase, and there is a way to do that. So it's very easy to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to do for I equals 0 to 9. All we're going to do, if search name dot to lower is equal to characters with an S, I dot get name dot to lower, that will convert everything to lowercase, then we know it's a match. So we need to record the index position, and that is wherever I is. We're going to set success equal to true so we can exit that outer loop, and then we're going to exit the for loop. We don't need to keep searching once we have found who we are looking for. So we set success equal to false. We get the name inside of our loop because it's until they enter a correct name. Once we find the name we have looked for, we set success equal to true and record the index position, which is what they wanted us to do. And we exit the outer loop. Let's take a look at the next part of the question. The user will enter a letter to identify the direction the chosen character from part 2e should move. If A is input, the character moves left, so the x-coordinate is -1. If W is input, the character moves up, y-coordinate +1, S, y-coordinate -1, D, x-coordinate +1. So AWSD, amend the main program by writing code to take a letter as input until it's a valid move. Change the position of the character using the appropriate method, which is the change position method. Let's swing over to vb.net and let's go ahead and amend our main program, our submain, by adding even more code to what already exists so we can implement this AWSD and changing the position of the character. So I'm going to create some more variables, then valid move as Boolean, and then I want to record their actual moving position, so we'll do move as string. So they're going to enter WASD. They're going to do one of those. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to collapse this code. All my code's still there. I just collapsed it. That way I don't have all this other code to look at. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set valid move equal to false because they haven't entered a valid move yet. I'm going to loop until valid move equals true. Once they make a valid move, we can exit the loop. So what we need to do is we need to ask them, what direction do you want to move? Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to display those options to them on the screen. So they can move A to move left. They can also enter W, that is the next one, to move up. They can also move console.writeLine S, and that is to move down, and then D, and that is to move right. Change this. Now, once we get it, we need to store that. So that is move equals console.readLine. Then I'm going to do move equals move dot to upper. Because what I want to do is I want to change it to uppercase. That way, in case they try to enter a lowercase letter, or if Cambridge is looking for that, we have accounted for it. Now all we need to do is use a select case for each of these cases. All right, select case, move, and we have case A, we have case W, and we want to make sure it's all uppercase because we changed it to uppercase, and we had case D. Now what we need to do is we need to call the correct method, and there was that change position method for the character they entered. Now remember, we searched for the character they were looking for, and we recorded the index position, and that is for this right here. So what we're going to do is if they enter A, characters, index, POS, index position dot change position, and then what we need to do is we need to add it. Well, if they're moving A, they're moving to the left. I'm going to decrement the X position by -1, but I'm not going to change the Y position. Then I'm going to do for W, characters, I'm going to do index position again, dot change position. Now, when I look on my keyboard, I know W is moving up. Well, that means I need to change the Y position. I'll be adding 1. Then for S, characters, index position, dot change position. Well, if I look at S, that is moving down. So instead of +1, I'm going to be using -1. And then for D, D is moving to the right. So I'm going to change that X position. This time though, instead of -1, I'm going to be doing it by +1. Now, each time this happens, valid move equals true. Now I'm going to have to put this under each one, because if they enter something that's not W, S, or D, then it's not a valid move. So valid move equals true. We're asking them to enter a direction until it's a valid move. We loop until valid, and just like that, we're done with that question. Let's move on to the next part. When a change to a character's position has been made, the program needs to output the character's name and the new X and Y coordinates of the character in the format. So Qui, not really sure how to say the name, but that's okay. The character has changed coordinates to X equals 83 and Y equals 0, so we'll be using those get methods. Then we're going to test our program by inputting the following 4 items. So we're going to enter Thomas. That is to show that there's not a valid name in the file. Then we're going to enter Key, however you say that name, X, which is not a valid move, then A for the valid move. So we'll be able to test our methods by using that, and then we should get this Key has changed coordinates to X equals 83 and Y equals 0. So let's go ahead and code that out. All right, we're just going to output that information. Console.writeLine is going to be a giant write line statement. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do characters. We're going to select the character that they chose, which is why we recorded the index position. Get name has changed coordinates. Then we're going to display the x and the y. So we're going to do x equals, and then we're going to do that characters index position dot get x. But we also need to display the y. So we're going to do y equals, and then we're going to do that again. Characters position dot get y. There we go. And just like that, we have it outputted. So let's go ahead and let's run this program, and we're going to enter that data they gave us. All right, we're going to put in Thomas. It should ask us what name we are searching for. It does, perfect. We're going to type in the unpronounceable name. All right, what direction do you want to move? Oh, this says ove down. Okay, we'll fix that in just a minute. Let's see here. They wanted us to type in X. Should ask us what direction we want to move again. If we choose A, when we subtract 1 from 84, that should give us 83. Y should still be 9 according to the text file. Unpronounceable name has changed coordinates. X equals 83, Y equals 9. That's exactly what we're looking for. I'm going to scroll up here to where I misspelled move. I'm going to put the M in, and just like that, we're done with question 2. Let's go ahead and move on to question 3 for this full paper 4 walkthrough. A program uses a linear queue to store up to 100 integers. That is the abstract data type they have chosen for this paper. It could be a queue, could be a circular queue, could be a stack, could be a linked list, a binary tree. Object-oriented programming could be included with one of those abstract data types. Could also be a dictionary. I have not seen a dictionary question yet. That doesn't mean that there's not one out there. I just have not seen any, but I have videos on all of those that I just said in case you need help with them. But let's take a look at this question though specifically so we can code it out. A 1D array queue is used to store the data. The head pointer points to the first number stored in the queue, and the tail pointer points to the next free space in the queue. Write program code to declare the global array queue, declare the global variable head pointer, assign an appropriate initial value, declare the global variable tail pointer, and assign an appropriate initial value. Let's swing over to VB and let's code this out. Okay, so we're going to create a 1D array. I'm going to use 99 as my max index, and that is going to hold a set of numbers. We also have a head pointer as integer, and we have a tail pointer as integer, and we need to select some initial values. So our head pointer is going to equal -1 because the head pointer points to the next item. If we don't have any items, it's going to be -1. The tail pointer points to the next free space. Well, if I haven't added any items, the next free space is index 0. Just like that, we're done with part A. Let's take a look at the next part. The function in queue takes an integer value as a parameter and stores it in the queue. It returns true if the value was successfully stored and false otherwise. Write program code for the function in queue. Let's swing over to VB.net and code that out. So we have function in queue, takes a value as a parameter, so I'm going to do num as integer, and it returns a Boolean value. Now, the first thing we need to do is check and see if we have room in our queue, and we check that tail pointer, make sure it's less than 100. If it is, then we got some room. But before we add anything, we need to check and adjust that head pointer, because if our head pointer is -1, then we need to switch that head pointer to 0, because it's going to point to the first or the next item in the queue to be dequeued. So this is only going to run one time, and it runs the very first time that we have an item. Now, once we adjusted the head pointer, or if we don't need to adjust it, because maybe it's the second time we are running it, we can add data to the queue. But what index? Well, that's the tail pointer's job, to point to the next free index. What are we putting inside that? we're putting in num. I'm going to increment tail pointer by 1 so it can point to the next free index. Then I'm going to return true. Now, if that doesn't happen at all, I return false. Either way, it's going to return true if we add an item. If we don't add an item, we simply return false. Let's take a look at the next part of the question. The main program uses the enqueue function to store the numbers 1 to 20 inclusive in the queue in ascending numerical order. So all we're going to do here is use a simple for loop that will run 20 times. The program should output successful if all numbers are successfully enqueued and unsuccessful otherwise. I'm in the main program by writing program code to perform this task. Let's swing over to submain, write a simple for loop, and an if statement to handle this question right now. All right, so I'm going to create a success variable as a Boolean. Then all I'm going to do is I'm going to do for I equals 1 to 20. We don't need to start at 0 because they want us to do 1 to 20 inclusive. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to Control Z to get it back to where everything is formatted. Success equals enqueue, and I'm going to pass down I. That's going to be my num. Now, the last success that is going to be recorded is the 20th number, which is 20. That's going to bounce back either as true or false. Now, it said only output success if all of them were added successfully. So we're going to do that with an if statement. If success equals true, then what we are going to do is we're going to write successful, else console.writeLine, unsuccessful. There we go. Just like that, we have picked up the 4 points. Make sure remember, it's only going to store the last one, and we only need to keep track of the last one. You don't need to create an array of Boolean here because we only need to keep it one count, and that's for the last number because we only need to output whether it's successful if all the numbers were outputted or added successfully. So that's why we don't need an array of Boolean variables. But let's take a look at the next part of the question. The following iterative pseudocode function calculates the total of all the values stored in the queue. So here we have function iterative output. We have a parameter start as an integer, which returns an integer. They declare total as an integer. They use a for loop to traverse through the entire queue, adding all of it together. So they have the starting index -1 all the way to the head pointer. So they're actually going down by 1. So that's very, very interesting that they're starting there. Total equals total plus queue count. So they're just adding all the values. We write the function as a recursive function using program code. So this is how they handle the recursive question. Very easy. Now, when you're looking at recursive, you need to ask yourself, okay, what do I need to replace? You need to replace whatever loop is in here because a recursive function is an alternative to a loop. So what we're doing is we're really replacing this loop right here. We're still going to be adding, but we're going to be adding by adjusting the start pointer. Let's swing over to VB.net and take a look at how this works. All right, we're going to do function recursion, and we're going to do by val start as integer, and this is going to return an integer. It's going to return the total. Now, start, I imagine, is going to start at index 20 because when we look at that for loop, the step is -1, so it's counting down. So we're going to adjust start when we call this recursion function again. Now, if start equals 0, then that means we've reached the end. All we need to do is return the queue and then the start. Now, if that's not the case, then what we need to do is we need to call this recursion function again. So I return queue start plus, and this right here is going to calculate the value, but it's going to add on recursion, and then I'm going to do start -1. That will decrement the value. That's all I need to do. I have my base case right here, which will exit. And when I do, when it's not 0 and haven't reached the end, because I imagine we're going to start at 20, 19, 18, 17. We need to add the start plus whatever the value of 20 is, then 19, then 18, then 17, then 16, all the way down. So when we do the first one, 20, we're adding on index 20 to index 19. Well, what is index 19? That's the value of index 19 plus index 18. What is that? That's the value of index 18 plus the index of value 17. So it's going to create all of these onto a stack for when it's winding. As it unwinds, it'll assign values to these. And then by the time we get to 0, it'll return the start, which has all the updated values. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next part of the question. All right, we've reached the last part of the question. The main program calls the recursive function from part 3D, outputs the value returned. In the main program by writing program code to perform this task. Again, main program, that means we're inside submain, and then we need to test our program. So what we're going to do is we're going to add up all those values 1 to 20 so we know what the expected output should be. That's what we'll be looking for. So let's go ahead and let's wrap up this paper 4 exam. So all we need to do is output the return of that recursion function that we wrote, and we're passing down tell pointer minus 1. The reason we're passing down tell pointer minus 1 is because remember, the tell pointer holds the value of the next free index in the Q array. So we don't want to get the value of the next available index because that's going to be 0 or null. So we do tell pointer minus 1. This program will work for more than 20 values. When we run it, we should see successful because all these numbers should be able to be added, and then we should see the value of 210. When I add up each index 1 to 20, it should come out to 210. So we run our code. We can see it does say successful, and it does show 210. And with that, in less than an hour, we're able to wrap up the paper 4 exam. This is definitely one of the shorter exams that I have seen. I have seen some that are a lot longer. So you need to mentally prepare for at least 2 hours of intense work. Remember, you got to test your code, you got to run your code, and fix any mistakes that you may have made. Now, when I go through this one, I didn't really have to check over any of my code. I just misspelled quite a few things, and I was able to fix it. So you do have a little bit of flex time to go through and change your code if you need to. But I hope you guys found this video helpful. If you did, please take just a moment to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to help the channel grow. And we'll see you guys in the next programming video.